Now, it's World Refugee Day, and according to the United Nations, the number of people who have been forced to leave their homes around the world has reached more than 65 million. These statistics are harrowing, but they can only tell part of the story. In a moment, we'll look at how music can tell the human side of the crisis, but first, the theatre. Well, Matthew Spangler is a US-based playwright who adapted the well-known novel The Kite Runner for the stage. He's also a professor of performance studies at San Jose State University, specializing in how immigration and refugee issues are portrayed in the arts. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us here on the program. We all know about The Kite Runner. Almost everyone I know has read it. But just tell me why you chose that particular play to bring out onto the stage.
Well, it's a terrific book. Khaled Hosseini and I both live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I read the book in 2004, about a year after it came out, and I thought that it could make a great play. The portion of the book I was initially drawn to is the portion where the family moves from Afghanistan to the United States as refugees. And I wrote the play in 2006, and it's gone from there. This is the 14th production, the one that's on here now at the Playhouse Theater.
We hear staggering sort of numbers, 65 million people and then 3 million, refugees moving from one place to another, so many millions of people displaced. But it's the individual stories that really capture hearts, don't they?
That's right. I mean, that's the thing about storytelling, isn't it? It reminds us of our common humanity, an idea that maybe gets insulted in some ways from the left and the right in recent years, but I really believe in it. A great story like Kite Runner is something that can remind us of the things that we have in common. And this story, as you point out, is about the refugees coming from Afghanistan to California. And I would just add that we have large refugee communities. San Francisco Bay Area, large numbers of Afghans, Vietnamese. The U.S. has a long history of accepting refugees. Of the refugees that have been resettled through the UN's resettlement program, the United States has been the world's leader in that regard.
It has, and the United States has been a mixing pot for so many years. And yet the spotlight now is on the United States because of immigration bans, because of the Muslim ban.
That's right, yeah. And that's been a real contradiction to the last, 4 decades of U.S. policy with regard to refugees. I mean, it was only as recent as 1980 that the United States took 200,000 refugees. And so to zero that number out, which is what our immigration ban, so-called, wants to do. Now, it says it will zero it out for only 120 days, but as a practical matter, it would last a lot longer than that. And so to zero out the refugees coming to the country would just be a huge contradiction to everything that's been in place for the last 4 decades.
And yet, when we look globally at the situation, with the rise of migrants and the migrant crisis that we saw here in Europe, and people always say 4 years ago, but actually I was just in Sicily last week, and the migrant crisis continues. Numbers of people leaving their homes are rising, and yet attitudes are hardening as well across the globe.
I think attitudes are splitting. I mean, on the one hand, we see a lot of press given to the hardening of attitudes, but we also have to remember that there are a lot of people who remain sympathetic to refugees. A lot of them are in the United States and Britain. And so I think what we're seeing, more than a hardening, is a splitting in attitudes between people who remain and are becoming sympathetic to refugees and those who maybe aren't as much.
How are the arts then helping to tell these stories, to tell the stories of migrants and refugees?
Right. Well, like I said, I mean, you can look at statistics, and you can look at, as you point out, 65 million people. It's the highest number since these numbers have been recorded of displaced people. And you can look at those numbers, and you can look at things about how communities are benefited by refugees who come in, not only because of the moral and ethical reasons, but also financially. I mean, every study that's been done on refugees indicates that they're also a financial benefit to the communities that receive them. And you can look at those statistics, and that means one thing. But a story is what really moves your heart. And so something like the theater, film, music, that's where attitudes can change on a real heart-level basis. And something like Kite Runner is just an amazing and beautiful story.
It really is. It's a story about loyalty and family and redemption. So many issues that are familiar to people. But if we go back to sort of the attitudes hardening, we're also seeing a rise in Islamophobia across the globe as well.
That's right.
And we've seen it here in the UK as well.
Right.
Just recently because of the Finsbury Park attack that we saw on the mosque.
Well, again, and a story can remind us of the things that we have in common. You go to a play like Kite Runner, and you know, I wrote the play, but Khaled Hosseini wrote the book, so I can celebrate the book without, you know, celebrating my own play as such. But the play just reminds you of the things we have in common, the common humanity that we share, and I think it's impossible to come out of 2 hours of watching that play and not feel an increased sense of humanity toward people who might be different than you or have a different religion than you, because you remember what, at the essence of it, you have a lot in common. You care about family, you care about your friends, your heart breaks in the same way, and a play can remind us of that.
It really can. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us here on the program, and The Kite Runner is being shown here in London, so I do urge viewers to go and see it. It's a great play. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.